Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves a track from an ex named Arrington titled Someone's Gonna Suffer. And if we switch over to here, I believe that we have this on YouTube. I think it's the lyric video if I'm not mistaken, and we're gonna listen through it from start till finish. And we're gonna hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. Immediately dramatic. Off of the North of Hell album. Loving the mid-90s alt rock kind of vibe to it.
They thought they could say whatever they want, but now they've said too much. I've been listening to them long enough, and now they've lost their touch. I've been hearing their nonsense every day, and I can't go much further, because I've been patient this whole time until now someone's gonna suffer.
Nice transfer with the Tom Fiddle there.
Because the torches were carrying us so bright that they could see us from a mile away. The men, the women and children. Everything is just a joke to them. Their happiness in vain. No one here is serious until someone is slain.
Interesting dissonance between the guitar tracks.
They grab their swords and their flintlocks because war has just begun. Now it's time for them to learn the hard way, because now someone's gonna suffer. Someone's gonna suffer.
It's quite Alice in Chains.
Pirates had infected the seas for generations, taking the life of my father and his father's farm.
Someone's gonna suffer.
The vocals are kind of prominent, but we'll see where it goes.
Dead men tell no tales. It's either heaven I gave the orders and the cannons fired at the ships and now goes another. And now goes another.
You could have potentially added more reverb with the late tails and then some of those vocals to kind of make him linger.
And now goes another. Someone's gonna suffer.
And then we have Arrington there on the LEDs over there. We're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Arrington titled Someone's Gonna Suffer, off of their upcoming 6th album titled North of Hell, if I'm not mistaken. In this section I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis from vocals through to production, as well as sort of any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I think this track is about someone who's been biding their time, watching as others are blasphemous there, maybe unaware of the sins that they're committing there, until we go to war across the 7 seas and effectively stake our claim on the turf, with them thinking that Arrington was dead or that they weren't in control of things, and then the tails turn at the end. It's a really, I feel like it's a tale as old as time. I kind of like the pirate imagery there. I think it's kind of cool from like a 7 Seas kind of perspective there. We talk at one point about a generational thing, my father's and my father and their father, etc. So I'm wondering if this is like a tale as old as time or something like that, or if this has been like a multi-generational thing in their own life. Either way, I think that it's an interesting story. I feel like there'll be an audience for it, regardless of whichever angle you kind of roll with. The vocals are fascinating in this one. I do like the styling of the lower octave parts there. It's this kind of gritty, full-bodied tone that kind of glistens in the mix there. It's ominous, and the kind of pirate shanties, like the heave-ho, you know, like how they go really low on some of the voices that they have there. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It's nice to be able to have that vocal range and also, you know, maintain presence within the mix as well. I think that needs to be commended. When they shout out the I heard blasphemy part in that upper range there, it's distinctive and works well as a pseudo hook line. And I like when that contrasts with the lower octave parts, because they're very sort of precise and present in their different positions. You know, they niche well. I'm not entirely convinced with the upper range or the head voice in certain parts there. It sounds like we're crying out at parts, and I feel like given the tension of the situation we're describing there, or the action or intensity of it, it makes sense from like an emotional or expressive perspective. Some parts the vocals kind of wavered in the mix from like a production perspective, as if they were maybe like a little bit too present in regard to everything else. And at other points we hit the notes quite clearly. It's more, I think, a stylistic endeavor rather than trying to provide a really sort of like precise performance melodically. I think we were more sort of going with the aesthetic that we wanted to provide there was, you know, there are clearly compelling melodies in some of the hook sections, and the verses are satisfying with how they work, you know, in diatonically with a lot of the chord progressions and arpeggios on those guitar parts. There were just some bits where I'm not sure if we hit the notes as cleanly as we needed to, but at the same time I appreciate the kind of raw nature of the performance, and I think it works well with both the subject matter and their outstanding elements. So the track itself at 5 minutes 39 is quite well fleshed out. It's a longer journey there, I think, with different chapters. And I think that if you're going to have a track that's outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot with it, if it's like less than 2 minutes, it's like maybe going to potentially miss some context that would be explained by a bit more sort of wording there or phrasing there. Whereas if it's longer than 4 minutes, you usually have to add more in there to kind of keep it compelling for people, and or so as to not overstay or overplay your welcome. Here we have several distinct sort of riffs based on the various guitar, bass, and drum parts there, with like a solo section as well that I quite liked. I'm going to talk about in a moment. But typically we had verses and choruses, and we articulated ourselves quite well through the majority of it. There were transitions that were quite effective between the parts. There was a really interesting drum sound there. It was kind of cagey and claustrophobic at certain parts, but at the same time I had this kind of processing on it where it was larger than life and very distinct and unique in texture. And I've got to kind of show some love for that. It's not often that I hear a drum kit and go, wow, I will remember that drum kit for its kind of the angle that they're going for within it. It's discernible, and I think it contrasts neatly with a lot of the guitar parts that we have here, despite the guitar is obviously being more of a melodic or harmonic device. I mean, immediately when you get to the start of the track, there are those kind of cinematic kind of explosion sounds. They're like the cannons going off, so that makes sense for what we're talking about, Battle on the Seven Seas. But just the sizzle of the drum kit there, and the way they're kind of frothing, kind of like are extremely spicy sounding, and the way that it works with an acoustic, like an electric guitar tone, should I say, that is so genuinely authentic for like the early 90s with a lot of the kind of grunge stuff back then. Again, I mentioned Alice in Chains not because I'm trying to put Arrington in a box, but simply because it's the closest thing I can remind myself of. I feel like their work is distinct from Alice in Chains, don't get me wrong. I see it as a compliment. I think that a lot of the arpeggios that we play on the guitars are fantastic. We explore those kind of minor and sort of like outside the sort of typical triad chords really neatly there. We have distinct riffs there that help to pepper and sort of segment different parts of the song. And just when you got those visceral kind of like the vocalist calling out on top of the sizzle of those, it's just, again, it is visceral there. You've got that kind of insinuating something bigger is about to come. But at the same time, it's a relatively somber affair, almost like the vocals have most of the intensity behind them because the story is where the action is. We have like different guitars in different positions. We have some sort of rotary reverb parts on one side there that kind of like add a nice sort of quarter or power chord effect, was occasionally arpeggiating. We have another kind of leady riff on the other side there, and the guitars effectively sort of surround you in a stereo field, not giving you all at once, kind of gradually building as we go along. And I like the fact that we're kind of exploring a higher range there with the vocals going lower. Again, just great sort of exploration of the frequency spectrum. And even if we kind of add different kind of asymmetrical leady or arpeggiated elements there on the guitar parts, they still seg nicely because we're aware of fundamental music composition and theory techniques there, knowing not to add too many chromatics unless we have the space to do so. The chromatics I mentioned are more sort of modally at that solo section in the mid part there. I think that we explore the scales and modes present in a way where we offer flexibility with needing to feel the need to have a nice sort of clean cut, like a Pentatonka blues solo there. It's very organic in the way that it kind of has a bit of tension at times there. The notes kind of they kind of saunter into the mix, and they're almost daring you to sort of question whether or not they're comfortable. And we have some really neat sort of parallel major like parts there where we kind of naturalize the sixth there, and it kind of like whittles around in the background of some of the vocal takes as like a sub lead there, so it's supportive as well as distinct on its own, with some interesting tremolo technique in addition to the bends and other bits of ornaments we have on the kit. So I like that the lead guitar solo is well fleshed out as well. And around the 3-minute 40 mark, we don't just have the drums in full band all the time. We have adjustment of the dynamic range of the piece there. We're not taking the listener's attention for granted. We're allowing there to be chapters. We get back into it a bit more later on, a bit more heavily, but like it's great to have diversity within a longer track. And it's just a very kind of like well handled outro there with the other elements like the guitars, etc., bass fading into the ether, with the bass guitar typically being very sort of like loyal to the root notes, if I'm not mistaken. I just feel like it was more of a supportive layer than anything else. Thematically, it's almost melancholic with its approach. It's minor typically. There are some minor triads that we have as well as some sort of melodic phrasings there, and the vocals definitely don't sound happy. But there's also kind of this two chordal passage that we keep going backwards and forwards to, and we could almost have spun a parallel major off of that in certain parts and still made it work. And I think with our sort of like subtle, a lot of the kind of rhythm guitar parts are, we're just not trying to be too aggressive about it. It's like we're letting you know that if you're paying attention just how much danger they're in, but we're not trying to overshadow things or like pop off too quickly. In terms of the studio recording, mixing and mastering, I think the vocals were a little bit present in the mix. They sounded a little bit louder than some of the guitar and drum parts there. The drums had I liked the production on the drums. I liked how kind of throaty and full of kind of vigor they were. but I'd need to listen to this track through in mono as well as stereo to kind of figure out how things niche within the stereo field. I just can't figure out whether, because there were some good vocal parts went out to the side, and there were some parts within this track where it just sounded absolutely fine, but there were occasional moments where I was like, oh, that's a little bit dominant, whether we were pushing too much within the limiter of the master bus, or whether we simply were going for an amount of dynamic range like that on purpose. I'm not sure, but if it was a stylistic decision, should I say, to have things a bit quieter than the vocals to allow that kind of depth, that's totally fine. It doesn't sound overproduced. We're not trying to sterilize and make things sound pretty here, even though some of the clean guitar tones with the effects on them sounded kind of pretty. Ultimately, it's nice and loud without pumping. And there was some interesting foley again with like the cannons and stuff like that, and the way they were placed around the stereo field, their positioning, the panning position was cool. Again, I think if there was any applicable constructive critique, it'd just be like leveling of certain instruments within the mix and just trying to sort of like balance those out. Then though, if we're going for a kind of a more of a raw, raucous tone, then that's totally fine. From a general listener's perspective, I think this is one of the more sort of original takes I've heard in a while there. We bring the blasphemy into it, and it effectively almost talks about, I don't know how to describe it. I need more time with it. But just the fact that I'm still trying to figure out what this track was about and its little intricacies after the fact shows I have an interest in it unrelated to the review. And I think, again, it's just going to be one of those things where it depends on the rest of the journey that Arrington has with their music. I mean, if this is their 6th album, interesting to hear what the rest of it sounds like. But either way, I think this was a good experience with this track. Thank you for watching my review of this track from an ex named Arrington titled Someone's Gonna Suffer. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.